Welcome to the First Responders Network. I'm Crystal Bailey, your host, where we are live from IACP in Dallas. We're at the Axon booth here, where we're going to be able to talk with law enforcement officers and chiefs from all over the country. But first, we have the CEO and founder of Axon, who's here with us. Axon is obviously a very mission-driven company. You've set a lot of goals, and you've accomplished so much. Can you tell me a little bit about the most recent goal you've committed to?
So we call it our moonshot, and it is intended to be a driving, measurable, in moonshot, it means obviously a big tech project, something that feels like it might even be impossible. But we've been doing our homework, and we believe after looking at the data that with some focused effort over the next 10 years, we can cut gun-related deaths between police and the public by 50%, which obviously is going to be hard because if we look at the numbers, this is a horrific week, 8 police officers shot and killed, the number of cops killed on duty is going up, the number of members of the public that die in lethal force incidents, and we look at this and we say, there's got to be new ways to do this. There's so much anger and vitriol and the blame game going on, and we're saying that's just not helpful, but let's set a goal, a meaningful goal. Let's try to save half these lives. Let's make police officers safer. Let's make it so they don't have to make the most terrible decision of their careers and use lethal force as often.
Yeah.
And it's been really exciting. I've been meeting with, customers here, and there's a lot of excitement that people are like, great, this is a way to focus our energies in a productive way on progress.
Yeah, you're mentioning that you've spoken with some law enforcement officers. You've spoken with the community at large. Last night I was at the state and provincial police reception, where you shared that it's really important to you to receive feedback from your customers, aka law enforcement officers, and all of these leaders in the law enforcement community. What was that feedback like when you shared this goal? Because it's a big one, right?
Yep. Well, it's been very positive.
Yeah.
This started a few years ago. I wrote a book called The End of Killing, and there I put forth our internal company goal that we want to, by 2030, build a non-lethal weapon, a version of the taser that will outperform a lethal weapon. And we've been very careful to say, look, we are not suggesting that police should be disarmed, or we're not criticizing when they use lethal force. But the point is, it is terrible to put human beings, police officers or otherwise, in a position where the only tool they can rely on with really high reliability is a bullet. It's been around for hundreds of years. We can do better as a society or as a species to give those officers better tools. And so it's on us to bring them the better technology. And the customers have been very supportive. Now look, they also say, Rick, this is a high bar. We have very dangerous jobs. But they're open to it. We want them to be safe. And look, there's also a role, there's been some controversy for some of the things I've said about drones and robotics. But right now, when you have an active shooter, and the only response we have is to ask human beings, public servants, hey, go through the door, take your own guns and go have a gunfight. I hate to be simplistic, but that's the state of the world. If we have a bad actor with a gun, the only way we can stop them today is to send in good guys with guns.
Right.
Well, I think we can give better tools so that we keep officers safer, we give more time, space, and distance, and we can really mitigate those threats without having to kill them either. And it's resonating. I think people are looking. Pain can drive change. These have been painful years for everybody. And I think people are reacting to, okay, here's something we can do about it besides listening to people yell at each other.
Yeah, I think you made a point about it being about protecting life, and it's everybody's life, the public, officers. This is a goal that's really surrounding both groups.
Yep.
And can you talk a little bit about how it's so important? We're here where all the leaders of law enforcement gather at the same time, at the same place. Can you talk about how important it is for everybody to kind of make this their goal? This is a communal goal.
Yeah, so one risk is we are under no delusions. Technology is not a panacea. The tech alone isn't gonna make it happen. This got to be a community effort. There's going to be new training, new policies required as the tech gets better. Like if we're talking about using a drone that can incapacitate somebody, whoa, like what safety measures should we have in place? What are the use of force policies going to be? But there's also roles from outside. What we would, as a technology provider, can do. We're trying to create a movement that gets people thinking productively. And I'll give you one example. We have a lot of customers in the United Kingdom. Well, in the UK, they have developed some of the world's most innovative training for how to deal with people with knives, because they don't have a gun if you're a UK officer. And so with the absence of having the gun as an option, they have created some very innovative ways to deal with folks who have knives. Now in the US, we also have people with knives. And we might be able to learn in those cases, hey, are there tactics they're doing in the UK where they don't have a gun? Now, I'm not suggesting that the US police shouldn't have a gun. That's not it. We're still going to have guns. But in these situations, hey, maybe other people have found a way to deal with this without letting it escalate to lethal force. And that's an example where I'm not an expert in that space, but because of Axon's reach, we basically are, we have contact points with every police department in the United States and now many around the world. So now we're looking at it as how can we be a better ambassador, where like when we put on our TaserCon conference in January, we're going to be inviting our friends from the UK to come, and we're going to help connect them with the American police training community and say, hey, look, we think you guys might learn from each other. We're going to make the connection. We're going to step back, and maybe this will help us all towards our moonshot goal. If that connection alone, maybe that saves 5% of people who are getting shot with knives today because we find new ways to deal with it. Awesome. We're happy to play our part, even if it has, in that case, that might have nothing to do with our revenues or the things we sell, but it feels good for us to move our mission forward through our relationships.
So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned the technology, all the things that Axon is creating to try to make this goal reality in the next 10 years. Talk about that.
Got it. So we think of this sort of in 3 chunks. Better tools, right? So more effective, longer range tasers, robotics and drones that can keep people safe. So better tools. New training, right? VR is an awesome tool to be able to put officers in more immersive situations, help them develop new and better skills. So we're investing heavily in the training tech, but then there's also the non-tech piece, like I talked about, sharing training from the UK on how they deal with edged weapons. Or we're dealing with some of the leading thinkers in American law enforcement. Just one other example there, Steve Imes, who's a well-known force expert. He teaches a course for officers on how to stay out of jail, which, all right, hey, it's good to, if that's one way to reach out to people, hey, I'm going to help you protect yourself. And one of the things he teaches is, you know what, when you're a cop, you need to leave your gun in the holster and only pull it out if you think you're in a lethal force situation. An example being, if you've got a big unarmed person who's physically resisting, if you take the gun out and you're now struggling over the gun, that can escalate to lethal force. Whereas if you leave the gun locked away safely in a retention holster, that reduces the risk of it escalating. That was a new concept for me, and I'm not a training expert, but I said, okay, you, Steve Imes, are a real expert. I'm going to put you on stage, and let's share this idea. So training's a big part, and then the third piece is really data. If we're going to solve the problem, we need to understand it better. An example I use is, some people are skeptical. Say, hey, Rick, how can you ever make a taser as reliable as a gun? Well, let me give you an example. An airplane. Airplane is really complicated, but it's more reliable than your gun. A gun will jam about, 1 out of every 1,000 rounds. Airplanes don't crash 1 out of 1,000 landings.
That's
and
true.
Part of the reason is because we've built really good safety systems, including black boxes. So when an airplane does crash, we can go get the data about what went wrong and design that problem out in the future. Well, when we think about use of force incidents, we don't really have great data.
Yeah.
In fact, there's not even a national use of force database. The best one in existence is run by the Washington Post, a newspaper. No offense to them, but that's not, we shouldn't be relying on a newspaper to collect that data. We should have either a government agency, or so what we're doing, we're working with IIR, which is a research firm, rigorous research methodology. So we're going to take the Washington Post data and other data sources. And so first step is, if we're going to cut these deaths in half, what's the number? We got to have a good data set. And then we're also building tools like Fathom, which is our new use of force response to resistance reporting software. And we're really building this instead of just, hey, giving you numbers you can publish on your use of force incidents. We want to get to the why. Like, why are these things escalating? Why are there failures when they happen? When we introduce new tools or techniques, do those change the numbers? Do we find injuries going down, et cetera? So with good data systems, just like good black boxes in aircraft, these are going to help us make our tools more effective. It's going to help police departments measure their training and their policies. Right. So between better tools, better training, and better data, that's how we're going to solve this.
And even speaking to that data, you mentioned last night it was about half, or maybe more than half, if I'm not mistaken, of these incidents with officer-involved shootings could have been prevented, or the death of that person could have been, the use of the gun could have been.
Yep. So
could have been brought down, right?
Based on our analysis to date, over 70% of law enforcement shootings could be resolved with tools that don't yet exist. I want to be clear.
Okay.
We're not saying, oh yeah, they got it wrong today. That is not what we're saying.
Right.
We're looking at this and we're saying, okay, they had to rely on a gun in this situation. We're not expressing an opinion whether it was justified or not.
Right.
That's not my position. That's not our expertise. We're looking at it and saying, can we imagine in that scenario, if they had a longer range taser that was more effective, could it have made a difference? And look, there's some cases where police tried to use an existing taser and it was an ineffective use, and then it escalated to lethal force. We look at that and we go, absolutely. If we had made that more effective, if the taser had worked when they used it, we could have saved that one.
So you're looking at ways you can improve the taser and the tools that exist.
Yep, and drones and robots too. I mean, part of this is, like when we send a bunch of armed officers through the door on a high-risk warrant type of call, that's a high chance something bad's going to happen. Like, they're scared, they're humans, they're surging with adrenaline, they're afraid for their own lives, and they've got lethal weapons in their hands, and they got to make a decision like that. That's not only dangerous for them, it's dangerous for the people in that house.
Right.
So if we look at it and we say, a lot of times I'll just use the golden rule. What would I want done to me? So let's say the cops were coming to my house, and maybe it's a mistake even. We've seen that. Well, if they're coming through the door, please send the drone, not the five guys scared for their own life with lethal weapons.
Hands,
So all this stuff is going to be controversial. We get it. That's part of the reason we're leaning into the moonshot, because this gives us an anchor. Like, why would we make a drone, maybe even a drone with a taser on it? Because we want to cut deaths in half.
So what about the existing technology? I know that, you have had great success with the taser and you continue to put out new models. But another angle is the transparency of the body-worn cameras and the level of scrutiny that they provide. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how that may help bring the culture to a level where deaths are cut?
Well, part of what we're doing, like what we're sitting here doing right now on FRN, this is important. So body-worn cameras, they have changed policing. And when you talk to officers, I have cops tell me all the time, they say, look, I'm a better officer because I'm wearing a camera, because it helps me remember my professionalism. It helps me remember to know how frustrated or scared I am. I've got to perform at my best.
Right.
Now, one of the downsides of all these cameras everywhere is some things in police work are ugly. Like, it's when force happens. I mean, there's terrible things that happen in these incidents, and those are the videos that end up getting shared, because on standard TV, right, if it bleeds, it leads. And so unfortunately, I think part of what we're doing is we're seeing now that all these cameras are out there, even if there's a relatively small number of bad outcomes, we're seeing more of it.
Right.
And that's creating more social angst and more negativity. And I'll actually even tell you, like, look, with the war that's happening in Russia right now, there are non-democracies in this world that want to see democracies fail. So in social media, it's like we just opened up America into a giant household where we're all online connecting with each other. And in our household, we have foreign psychologists that want to burn us down, and they want to create these divisions, right? So we got bad actors, and then we've got the media. I'm not saying media are bad actors, but look, they want to get eyeballs. That's their business, and they know that if it's controversial, it leads. So what we're doing with FRN is we're saying, hey, look, the only time the public sees you, we don't want it to be in your local news, because they're not going to show all the good work. So with FRN, we're going to create a policing show that's authentic, a series of shows, right? A channel that's authentic. And look, it's not going to get canceled. Certain networks canceled police shows after George Floyd because they said, well, it's too controversial to be showing the positive side of policing. I say, look, like the more police can show what they're doing to the public, the more the public is going to understand the challenges they face. And look, we want to build that relationship between police and communities, and I think the First Responder Network is the way to take body cameras and share more of what's happening in a way that's entertaining and engaging and builds relationships.
Absolutely. And I think there isn't an indirect correlation between what people believe about the police and this moonshot goal. The more people trust each other, the less likely those interactions would escalate, I would say.
100%. And actually, something I've been talking about with the FRN team, as this evolves, I would like to create, for example, shows where we do in-depth analysis on the most controversial force cases. So think of, the ones where, look, there have been bad outcomes.
Yeah.
Right now, you hear 30 seconds of angry analysis, and these are complex. So what I'd like to do is I say, let's take a Ferguson, Missouri type incident, and let's do an hour-long documentary on it where we bring in thoughtful people from the civil rights side, from the use of force side.
Agreed.
Because you can't get, like one reason I hate Twitter, I don't spend much time on Twitter, you can't have a real conversation in these little snippets. All you can say is angry things, and those are the things that get it
Twitter
promoted.
war.
Twitter wars, yeah. I like Reddit. If I'm going to talk about, deaths related to Taser, I can't do it in 24 characters or 48.
Yeah.
But I'll set aside a day and I'll go deal with it. And I think FRN can be the same thing. It's long form, thoughtful, and we can't let it be propaganda. It's got to be authentic. That means when bad things happen, we're going to help law enforcement talk about it.
Have
and we're going to help people who have concerns talk about it in a constructive way. We're like, hey, let's get to the truth. Now, it still may make people angry, but at least we're getting to some thoughtful analysis, not just all the negative emotions.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And, I've actually even heard some people say to me that the body-worn cameras have exonerated some officers when, things have been controversial. They watch it back and they say, well, the person is good. They're justified.
Yeah, I mean, the number's over 90%. Like when I talk to agencies, they're telling me all the time that, look, police officers, it is a rough job in many ways. They get verbally abused. And I don't even think, so if you get pulled over for a ticket and you're angry and you're yelling at the officer and you're upset, even if you don't think you're lying, you remember that incident. You're like, that was a bad incident. There was yelling and rudeness, and I'm going to file a complaint. Well, in the heat of the day, when you go back and that person comes in and they look at the video, a lot of times what they see is, oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was me doing most of that, and the officer was actually pretty professional. 9 times out of 10, that's what happens.
Right. Yeah. So then there's a lot of good that can come from the existing footage. Like you mentioned, it's a place where we can tell good stories. We can highlight the times where there's an awesome rescue and there's a really amazing officer doing something really out of the ordinary or beyond the scale of their job. So, I mean, I'm excited to be part of FRN. I'm excited to be part of the bridge between law enforcement and the community. And for me, it's a space where I can really bring healing to a lot of brokenness that exists in this country. And, I believe this Moonshot Goal is part of that as well. And so I'm grateful.
Well, we're delighted to have you on the team. I mean, imagine if you had a broken family and the only interactions you had with each other were through Twitter.
Yeah.
Your family would never heal.
Right.
It would be,
exactly.
We need to have meaningful conversations. We need to let people connect in ways that are authentic and deep, but we got to get out of this anger cycle.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I love the way you talk about being part of the healing.
Yeah. So I have to bring it back to this goal. You have had a lot of goals, and in the span of your career, you've seen so much come to light from these, maybe at the time, seemed like crazy ideas. Can you talk about, can I ask you this question of whether you believe, as big as this goal is, do you believe this might be your biggest goal or one of the biggest goals in your career?
This is the biggest, most measurable goal. Like I've talked previously about, we're going to make the bullet obsolete or we're going to outperform the police handgun. But how do you measure that?
Yeah.
Right? it's a little fuzzy. And so what this was like, all right, let's bring this into focus, where it's like, okay, this isn't just theory. In 10 years, we're going to know if we made it or not.
Yeah.
Like we got a scoreboard now.
Right.
So that's what makes this exciting. And I'm going to be honest, like I'm really proud of what we've done, but I'm also a bit ashamed. Like I'm sitting here after 30 years. It's like, how come we haven't come farther? And part of the reason for this goal is I'm pushing our organization to take risks. It'd be easy to sit back and we can make the next taser a little better than the last one. And that's like the natural thing to do. Like change is hard.
Yeah.
And so I'm using this as a rallying cry to say, no, the next taser, we shouldn't be comparing it to the last taser. We should be comparing it to the 9mm. What makes it so much more reliable than us? What do we have to do? And that makes people uncomfortable. Look, our customers too, they squirm a little. It's like, wait a minute, like my taser's over here, my gun's over here, these are different tools.
Yeah.
And we're saying, no, we want to get to where you don't have to use this thing over here.
Yeah.
And I've been really pleasantly surprised how well police have reacted, because they know, look, this isn't, maybe in the 1970s there was this, kicking down doors and arresting bad guys. And the world is complex. There's not really, 20 years ago I used to hear, some people need killing. I hate to say it like that, but that used to be kind of a thing, like there's bad people out there.
Yeah.
I don't really hear that anymore. Now look, there's still some, with these school shooters, and there's still some evil human beings.
Right.
But the fact is, in the most situations, it's complicated. The guy who killed my two friends when I started this business, he was a guy with a temper, a gun, who got in a bad situation. And that happens all the time with police. Like it might be that person you're dealing with had a really bad day, didn't take their psychotic medications. I mean, you can go through the list.
Yeah.
And then when the dust settles, like if that officer used lethal force, that is traumatic for them. That can ruin their careers. It can ruin their family lives. We see, the risk of suicide and other horrific outcomes. So I am really enthusiastically excited at the way our customers are. Again, they're embracing this. They're telling us, hey, Rick, you got a lot of work to do because you ain't there yet.
Yeah.
But they're excited to go on this journey with us.
Well, I'm excited to be here as well on this journey, and whatever small part I can play in bringing, people together to talk about these issues.
Well, our goal is to make FRN not a small part, but a big part of the conversation. The more we have meaningful conversations that don't happen in,
Twitter.
tiny angry snippets, the better.
Yeah.
So your work is important. Thanks for coming to do it with us.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us live at IACP. And the next interview we have is with Chief Robert Handy, who is an extreme enthusiast about the moonshot goal, and he'll share why, his perspective, and why he thinks it's meaningful and why he thinks it's going to work. So stay with us.